For our lecture on chimpanzees and language, actually it's a discussion with the class that you'll hear. Our first 8 questions are the short answer questions, many of them in a row. The challenge of this exercise is to listen carefully and try to find those short answer words that are said directly in the passage, but introduced by paraphrases in each of the questions. So this may look small on your screen here, but you saw these before as you answered questions. Really, the trick here is before you listen to definitely, like you always do, look at those key words, trying to notice where you're going to have to move from one question to the next. For this question, definitely very critical that you don't get lost. You could really miss a lot of points if you get lost in the lecture. Okay, so this one, you definitely want to use your strategy of focusing on the current question, listening for that answer as it comes in the passage, but then also knowing what question's coming next so that you don't possibly miss one and get kind of lost in the passage and then miss a lot of questions because you don't know where you should be. Okay? Secondly, this one, the lecture goes quickly. There are some answers that come very fast, one after the other. Then there are some sections where you have a little more time in between the words. With all short answer questions, you need to really get used to writing quickly. Writing notes in your exam booklet as quickly as you can to try to record those answers, but to keep listening as you're writing those things down to make sure you don't miss anything. It's a tough one, okay? This passage is difficult, but hopefully you got most of them, all of them, after listening to the lecture and discussion here. Let's go through. We're just going to go through and quickly look at where in the discussion the answers come from for each one in case you missed any in particular and want to know where to find them. Here they are. So let's go through one by one. The video shows chimpanzees using sign language to talk about one another, people, and themselves as the answer. This is where we get that answer.
The video we just watched shows chimpanzees responding to a human language, American Sign Language, and also using it. Talking to humans, talking to each other. You even see them talking to themselves.
Those answers, paraphrases here, talking to each other, talking to humans, okay, they came in a different order than you heard in the listening, but it very clearly ends that phrase with "and talking to themselves," and that's what you're supposed to listen for here. Okay, the next one. Since the videos appear dated, okay, dated. Is this a word you're familiar with? That means old. They look old-fashioned, okay? They don't look modern or current. That's what looking dated means. If you missed this question, maybe you missed that part of the meaning of the word dated there. Okay, hopefully you didn't. And anyway, since the videos appear dated, a student questions whether scientists currently perform similar. Okay, you might be able to just guess this answer. This is one where you could probably predict something like experiments is coming up. And sure enough, this is what the professor said in the lecture.
But the footage all looked really old. Are scientists still doing experiments like that today?
Okay, so she wonders whether scientists are still doing experiments like that today. She says the footage looks old. Footage is another word for recordings or videos. So the answer there is experiments because she's wondering whether scientists still do those kinds of experiments today. Okay, next one. The professor admits that the examples in the video are, okay, if you got the last answer, again, this might be a place for prediction. You could maybe guess that a word like older is coming next, but of course you need to listen for it. And this is where it came in the passage right here.
You're right, though. The examples in the video are older ones from the 1960s and 70s.
Okay, so she says older ones directly there, and she admits that this is true. That's what she's doing as she says, yeah, it's true. These videos are older ones. Okay, so next one. A student did not expect that the chimpanzees would be so comfortable with human language. This is where we get that from.
Well, I guess I was surprised at how comfortable the animals looked, using human language.
Good. Okay, so paraphrase. I guess I was surprised is a paraphrase for did not expect. Okay, and he says that he was surprised at how comfortable they are using language there. Okay. Recent research found that chimpanzees use sign language to communicate in the wild. Okay, and that comes from this spot in the lecture.
Researchers realized that chimps will use their own sign language to talk to each other in the wild.
Okay, so researchers found basically a very close paraphrase here, and in the wild was the phrase that finished what the professor just said. So hopefully you caught that as you were listening to the lecture. Next one, it is mentioned that the way people control their vocal cords, blank, and teeth, the way they control their vocal cords, blank, teeth, and lips is unique to humans. All right, again, another spot for prediction here. We've got a bunch of nouns. We know we're going to listen for a noun. All of these are related. And so perhaps that word tongue stood out to you as belonging to this list as you were listening to the passage. Hopefully so. This is where it comes in the discussion.
And it doesn't have the distinguishing characteristics of human speech. Let's review those. Who can tell me some of those characteristics?
Using a voice, right? Because no other living thing has so much control over the vocal cords, the tongue, teeth, lips.
Okay, so she starts off by saying that nothing else has so much control. Okay, so that means it's unique to humans, right? So there's your paraphrase there. But otherwise, we see this list of things basically stated in the same order and the same way as in the passage. So hopefully you caught that word tongue at the middle of the list. Okay, two more. The use of a voice is not a blank in all human languages. Okay, so is not a what? Well, that came from this spot here.
It's true that most humans can communicate with their voice in a way you don't see other people. Other animals. Other animals use their voice, but they can't make words the same way, voicing them, pronouncing them. But that's not really a necessity in every human language.
Okay, so there at the end, the use of a voice is not a necessity in a human language. She's correcting when it suggested that the human voice sets humans apart. She's suggesting, wait a minute, but what about sign language? What about these other places where humans communicate without using speech? So that's where she mentions the use of a voice is not a necessity for a human language. And our final one, unless they are blank by humans, chimpanzee sign language is very simple. Okay, so we heard towards the end of the end of this section of the discussion where the professor says this.
And chimps don't do that naturally in their own sign language. Their own signs just communicate their immediate situation. Without being trained by humans, chimps just say stuff like go here, or stop that.
Okay. The point the professor is making is that chimpanzee sign language, even though they do it in the wild, even though they use sign language in the wild, it is very simple. And those examples she gives are examples of how simple it is. And then she says, unless they're trained by humans to use more complicated signs, their language will remain quite simple compared to human language. Okay, so this task here is really you're testing your ability to follow along with this complex lecture. to listen for paraphrased ideas. This is a challenging one especially if you weren't able to catch some of the paraphrases in there. You may have had trouble answering a few of these difficult questions.